Welcome to Neurodivergency, where neurodivergent voices and friends turn struggle into strength. We're here to break the stigma around mental health, dive into the truth about our brains, and bring you real tools for clarity, healing, and hope. Today's guest is Renee Richardson. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Anthony. Thanks for having me.
Such a pleasure. Renee, why don't you start with telling us a little bit about yourself?
I am a solopreneur, so just recently started my own business, but I've been a creative, um, lifelong learner, I would say, um, supporting people in the community primarily in terms of my job, but I love to learn new things, so I do a lot of that in my spare
And
time.
what's your relationship to neurodivergence, or what brings you to the podcast?
Yeah, so I most recently found out that I have ADHD probably about 18 months ago now. So I didn't have any idea that I had it up until that point. Um, so it's been a steep learning curve in the last 18 months, but also very um, validating because a lot of the experience things that I thought were me being wrong are just clearer now, easier to understand why I had
Yeah,
some struggles.
and how young were you when you found out about the ADHD diagnosis?
I was 44, so I'm nearly 46 now. Yeah, so young 44.
Beautiful. Okay, well, it's great to have that clarity. Can you tell us a bit what life looked like when you were struggling but didn't know what the reasons were behind those struggles?
I've had a few periods through my life where looking back, they were kind of um, significant in terms of my journey. Um, do you want me to tell you about those or just the most recent?
Yeah, tell I think the most poignant of your struggles.
Yeah. So for me, the first poignant point in my struggles was when I was about 11 years old. Um, I was incredibly active. So I was not necessarily in organized sport, but incredibly active as a child. Dancing and running were my big ones, but I would do anything active. And then I had a fall on my tailbone, which resulted, I think it was due to this, resulted in my arches in my feet collapsing. So I wasn't able to be physical as I had been for about a period of 12 months. Um, the reason that was challenging was obviously on a number of levels. I think, like, socially, my world changed. My friends were all active as well. So I sort of lost my friend group. My physical expression of energy, I couldn't use that anymore. Um, I always had both mental and physical expressions of energy, but when I couldn't use my body in the way that I had to have 3 surgeries, and yeah, it was basically off my feet for 12 months. So that was really hard. However, I learned how to listen to my body in that um, experience. So even at a young age, I was reflecting on what I could do rather than what I couldn't do, how I could put my focus into my creativity and learning other things about myself, but listening to my body. I didn't know I had ADHD, but I think that was a struggle partly because I had ADHD. When I was about 20, um, because of the foot problems and I'd still been listening to my body, I was trying to formulate what kind of career I wanted. I knew I didn't want just a job. I wanted to be able to help people, but in terms of environment, knew that I couldn't stand up for all day and like be a waitress, for example, because the standing was going to be problematic for me. So logically, I thought I'll work in an office. But my first experience of doing that was so overwhelming. It was partly to do with the role. The good things about the role were that it was diverse. So I was working with people, things were changing all the time. And that kept my dopamine engaged. I was helping people, so having that passion behind what I was doing was incredibly helpful for me having ADHD. Um, what I didn't know at the time was I really did know about my body. I needed to listen to my body and I needed to listen to what I needed about the environment. So I made choices without knowing why I made choices. Probably the easiest way to describe it. I knew if I was able to be the manager, for example, I could control my immediate physical environment. So that meant, having a headset or having an office or having a space where I could also have more autonomy over how I chose my tasks, how I prioritized certain work. And I knew that those elements were necessary for me to enjoy work rather than be completely overwhelmed by just task related repetitive work. So yeah, that's something that on reflection I realized was really beneficial for my ADHD journey. So I was lucky. I worked really hard. I studied, as I said at the beginning, being a lifelong learner. I've worked full time and studied at least part time my entire adult life. So I've got
Wow.
loads, loads of qualifications and certificates, and have applied them at work all the way through. So that has
Amazing.
kept my mind active and engaged and moving forward, having something to look forward to, and having different things to focus my mental energy on other than like a singular thing has been helpful for me as well.
Yeah.
Has it created burnout? Absolutely.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you
Um,
also experienced burnouts with all of this.
yes, yes,
Hmm.
several times through my life. Um, so that was sort of the downside to, doing a lot of things that I love. I would also push myself too much and not know what was sort of going on there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then until recently, so as I said, I was 44 when I got the news that I've got ADHD. And how that came about was I was focusing on my health. So I don't know if this is an ADHD centric thing, but pretty much my whole life I've been trying to fix myself or work on myself. So I was going through a journey of weight loss and focusing on my health. So I was quite single minded around the outcomes that I wanted to achieve in regards to that. And as a result of that, I decided to step down in my career. So I had been managing large teams in the health space and in the community sector, helping people with their careers, looking after pretty large teams and that were geographically dispersed over state. So I wanted to be able to focus on my health and not be going home and then doing what most, at least middle management, do, which is still focus on the emails, make sure everything's okay, think about your staff, plan about your things that you need to do moving forward. And I was also the manager that always put my hand up for things. That's what made me most comfortable in the job, was having those diverse projects and opportunities to work across departments or with external partners, and create brand new programs and things like that. So lots of growth from nothing has been a big part of my career as well. But yeah, so I was stepping down. So I stepped down to what I call an easy job. It's not easy in terms of, you know, the complexity of the people's situation. So I was still working with people that had brain injuries, mental health issues, complex life situations, and large support teams that were, complex. But the actual tasks of my specific role were repetitive. So there was a lot of things like, answering the phone or doing a document. And it was just it was stuff that I've done, known how to do, and trained and supported people to do for 20 years. So that's why I say easy.
Kind of step
The people,
down, not
yeah, with the
necessarily step down, it could be step
responsibility.
down with responsibility in order to lighten the demands on your brain in some way, in order to free up space, in order to prioritize other things, which was the health journey. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm
exactly.
curious. I'm curious. Well, on two threads, and you can answer in either order that you want. One thread is I'm curious to hear the end of that story, about how did that lead to the ADHD diagnosis. But I also, on the other thread, I want to circle back to the burnout experiences and share as well with the listener that what does that look like. So after you.
Um, for me, logically, I'll finish the current one because I'm fairly close to
Yeah,
sort
yeah, I
of
figured.
wrapping up that part of that story. So, sorry for just running off and
No
talking
worries
without
at
letting
all.
you
No
join
worries
the
at all.
conversation, really. Yeah, so I was in that role that was, uh, let's actually call it more repetitive tasks and less responsibility in terms of all the people and, operational responsibilities. I did try to, um, so again, I guess instinctively, I knew when I was doing the job, I needed more mental stimulation. So I had just finished my master's as I was starting that job. Um, so I did a master's in business, and yeah, I just literally kind of finished that around the same month roughly as when I started this job. And that was also pretty much the same month that I had the surgery that I had in regards to weight loss and starting that journey. So I was aware that there was things not going right for me and that I did need some more mental stimulation. So I'd asked the workplace about a couple of different options, how I could use my knowledge or skills to help the business in a couple of different areas. And that wasn't welcomed. I was encouraged to stay in my box as such, which again, I'm not sure if this is a ADHD trait. It certainly is for me. I'm a rebel, a rebel at heart. So anything that I think will help me or others moving forward, I will try and influence change in a positive way. So when I'm trying to just offer, something that I think will help a business and then it's not received, I struggle with that. So that was one of my signs. I was kind of like, I'm trying to do this, but I know there's something I need to do to stimulate my brain. If I can't do that at work, I'll have to do that outside of work. So I decided to enroll in another master's. I was going to do a master's in public health. And I found the workplace just too frustrating. So I was trying to come up with strategies at work to help me fit into the environment, such as sound cancelling headphones, so that I can focus on my work by either adding music, blocking people, adding the right noise at the right time, or taking away noise at the right time. That was helpful because working in a bullpen kind of environment is what we call it here in Australia. It's basically just a random desk. That doesn't work. That doesn't work for me. So moving out of managers, like I didn't even think about it before I stepped down. I was more focused on the responsibility side and the stress of, the extra responsibility while I was trying to go through this health journey. And I kind of forgot about the whole bullpen environment. So stepping into that was not only challenging from a sound perspective, it was challenging from a energy perspective. So I can walk into a room and pretty much name everyone's emotions, where they're at, what they need, what I can do for them, and it could be just called intuition, whatever, but I really am sensitive to that. So that was also challenging. And basically, yeah, I burnt out in that job because I couldn't meet my own needs in the most simple environment. So it turned into, I think one of the first signs this time was feeling like I didn't want to get up in the morning. I definitely didn't want to be going into the work environment. I was lucky at the beginning to have that job post COVID. So in Australia, a lot of the businesses are still doing a hybrid arrangement where people can do a couple of days in the office, a couple of days from home. And that certainly works better for me on all counts, particularly with ADHD, because then I can manage my workflow, energy flow really autonomously, I guess, choose the tasks that I do on which days and where I do them. But yeah, environment is a huge factor for me in terms of how I manage all of that. Um, what else do you want to
So,
know about the
so you
burnout? More of
you
the
you mentioned burnouts, but what did it look like to someone who, for example, doesn't know that they might be heading into a burnout, or who might underestimate the impacts of a burnout? What would you share?
yeah. I might actually go back to each of the three times that I had those sort of highlighted transitions in my journey. So with the change of my inability to use my body physically at 11, the way that I was used to using it, um, I would almost say that that sensation, the frustration, the shutdown emotionally, and a lot of the experiences that I had then was probably like early young burnout, because I couldn't do what I wanted to do. So people can probably relate to that
These are the
to
warning
some
signs.
degree.
Yeah.
Yeah,
To
yeah. And then, yeah, so when I had the first one that I would actually clarify, like that I would actually classify as a burnout was in my early 20s. I'd had the beginning type feelings that I had when I was 11. I was starting to um, have fatigue. Um, I was losing interest in things that I had been enjoying. I was always quite creative. I used to draw or paint or sing or dance, and do things that could be considered creative. And I really just, it probably just seemed on the surface like I was a grumpy teenager or something like that. Um, but I was also going through quite a lot of things between the age of 16 and 20. There was a number of, I guess you could call them, well, they were in and of themselves traumas. So, um, and one of them on their own could have caused, you know, you, you to get to a point where your system's like, I don't want to do what you need to do on a day-to-day basis. Um, it could for other people be sort of a experience that you might look at other people and think, oh, they might be a bit depressed. So on the surface, they might lack motivation. I certainly lacked motivation. I lacked energy, like the physical expression of energy. So if you've ever, well, I mean, probably everyone at some point has had a day where you feel like there's nothing in the tank. Everyone's definitely had days where they've only had like a little bit left in the tank. And they're kind of like, actually, I know I just need to go to sleep or I need to rest. And they can be aware that they need to rest. Um, I've had also chronic illnesses, um, autoimmune conditions, and a number of health issues. Had like general anesthetic about 24 times. So I've had health conditions as well throughout,
was
which
that
is
correlated with the burnout times, or was that just all the time
no,
throughout your experience?
all the time throughout. So for me, um, the burnout was chunks of time, but each time it sort of got harder to move through it, or maybe took a bit longer because it's a bit accumulative, I think. Like we're only here for a certain amount of time, and if you keep having pressure on your body, on your mind, on your spirit, on all of you, it can be a cumulative thing. However, I'm not sure if this is uh, an experience that anyone with burnout had. The most recent one that I had may not have been full blown because I identified warning signs and I took action actively. It still hit me. It still took about 6 months, maybe a bit longer, before there was a real significant shift to me to start feeling good again. Um,
Were you
but with
still
all my
working during that time? Or what was the
this
consequence
time,
of the
no.
burnout? Or was it a subtle kind of shift, spectrum of affecting you more than less?
Um,
Or was there maybe like a breaking point, loss of a job, just
yes.
collapse or something?
So one of I'm kind of actually now connecting some more dots from your question. Um, the beginning of the last one would have actually been 2 years ago, and it actually went for 18 months. But I was just going to say it felt like it only went for a month. So that probably doesn't really make sense. What my I was
To me,
having it does.
to me it absolutely makes sense. I've had this similar experience. I've never broken from burnout, but I have gotten to a point where I actually took some online tests and consulted with some professionals, and they were like, yeah, you're on the burnout spectrum, and if you go harder you will break. So it has
Yeah,
forced me to slow down. And the key learning here is that burnout is a spectrum, and it's mental, it's physical, it's emotional, spiritual if you want. And all of those dimensions, we all have different thresholds of identifying what is the point where we start investigating it. And I guess when we break is because we haven't investigated it, or we haven't self-cared in advance of the breaking point. But probably a ton of people are on the burnout spectrum and not even realizing it. And I think that's the key thing here
yeah,
that makes it, you've realized it for 1 month, but actually you were probably burning out for 18 months, if that aligns with your
yep,
story.
yep, exactly. That's exactly what happened. So I when I first, now that I'm saying that 18-month period, at the beginning of that 18-month period, I quit my job for the first time ever without another job to go to. And I've never done that. So my working life was always responsible. I, for the most part, have um, lived on my own and had to provide for myself and not been able to do that any other way than working. Um, so I have, yeah, I got to a point where that particular situation was a conflict of values for me, the role, things that were happening there in that particular environment. So, yeah, I quit um, on the day after I was driving home from work. So that week, I drove home from work bawling my eyes out at least 3 times. Um, and I've never been to that point before. I had spoken to a psychologist because I knew that I was struggling. Um, and she said, "Can you just leave?" And I was like, "No, I've got to pay rent, I've got to pay bills and whatever." But she did ask me one of the most appropriate pivotal questions. What would happen if you continue the way that you are? versus what would happen if you left. Like, I, the only thing that could happen if I left was I could get better. If I stayed, I couldn't. So I left with pretty much nothing to back me in terms of financial support, etc. So, but it was worth the risk because my health was more important. That was a catalyst for not just on its own, but for in part around choosing when to deal with other stuff for my health, and took me down that path. And I was struggling for that whole period. Um, but for a few reasons as well. I would say I was on the edge of burnout the whole time because I just hadn't had a chance to heal properly, mentally, emotionally, or physically. Like, I put my body through a lot with the physical side, but mentally and emotionally, I'd thrown myself into an environment that wasn't suitable for my coping mechanisms and how I lived, how I was used to living my best life before that. Um, yeah, and then also I found out I had menopause at pretty much the same time that I found out I had ADHD. So there was hormonal changes that I'd been aware of for 5 years leading up to that, and I
You
thought
had or hadn't
advice.
been aware of? Sorry, I didn't
I
catch that.
had, I
You had
had
been aware of.
been
Yeah.
aware for about 5 years. I remember asking doctors several times, "Can you do a test? I want to know." Blah blah blah. I'd kind of only heard about perimenopause a year before I was diagnosed, but I thought maybe I've already got menopause. Like, I knew I had symptoms, I knew that I wasn't right, I knew I wasn't as I had been anyway. I knew that there was things that weren't normal. Um, but they all just said, "You're too young, don't worry about it, the test won't be conclusive." Da, da, da. They brushed me off several times. Um, till this time, they did a test and I won menopause. Quite literally. I know that sounds silly, but in terms of the measurements that they use, I have definitely already been fully in menopause at least 2 years by that stage, they predicted. Um, so, yeah, I wasn't wrong, but as per usual, and in particular for women with ADHD, as the research is starting to come out, we're behind. Like, medical research for women is behind.
Yeah,
So
it's a
there you
tricky
go.
situation, and it it forces us to do a lot of self-learning and maybe even self-advocating when we are met
Absolutely.
with resistance. Um, yeah, we've talked a lot about what yeah, a lot of elements about your journey so far. I'd love to know more about what does life look like today for you with all of these learnings and things that you've integrated so far.
It's exciting. So I've had um I I didn't end up doing my Masters of Public Health. I was exploring a whole bunch of courses at around the same time. I did enroll in that, but I withdrew and started to do a range of coaching courses that were a little bit more um, focusing on me, my development, what I wanted to learn about myself, and then how to utilize these skills in coaching. I decided at the end of a contract period with that last job that wasn't the right fit for me, that I would not not go back to a full-time role. I wanted to start my business, so I went all in on that. So I studied a lot in the first 6 months in sending that contract, and that was pretty much exactly 12 months ago. So for the first 6 months of this last year, I studied and completed about 8 or 9 different more courses. Um, so yeah, I have several masters in different coaching sort of areas, um, which has been really cool. It's incredibly hard work, actually. Really doing the work on yourself, and with others, and doing a lot of practice. So hours and hours and hours of practice on top of what you're learning. Um,
Yeah, it's wonderful that you've been able to keep going with the studying. How has the shift to entrepreneurship felt emotionally and physiologically, biologically for your ADHD, do you feel?
I think it's a perfect fit. Um, for me, the combination of um, diversity in what's required, um, utilizing my strengths across the board in terms of all the things that I've learned and done are relevant to my business. Um, it's creative because it's got the aspects of marketing and design and things like that to develop content. I've written a book um, just in the last few months. I've just finished that. I'm editing it at the moment, and I'll be self-publishing that myself. Any will probably it'll probably take a few weeks to sort of set that up and get it
Super
out
cool.
there.
What's the book about?
Yeah. Interestingly enough, it's about burnout and transitioning through to flow. Is sort of how I would frame it. It's a lot about. It's not really just about my story. It's a lot about the people that I've helped through the years and the strategies that I've used to help others as well as to help myself, and that I've learned from other people. Um, I've I've coached through my leadership roles and responsibilities and the particular um, businesses that I've worked for well into the thousands. I I wouldn't even know how many, but I say it's more than 10,000 because I did a quick calculation and I know it has to be more than that. To be well more than that. I yeah, so I've learned a lot through that, and I'm doing that now. So I'm just starting a community for women, um, and that is my whole life purpose, basically supporting women to through leadership and building their strength so that they can feel more confident, they can choose what they want with their own career or business. So I'm helping entrepreneurs and um, women in leadership to reach
That's
their dreams.
amazing. Yeah, that's amazing, and yeah, burnout is definitely one of those sneaky ones to really be aware of. So um yeah, I'm glad to hear you living in alignment with your purpose and on a more autonomous way, which is also a
Yeah,
nice medication for ADHD, to have control over your schedule, your environment, the work that you do, and how you do it, is amazing. Um, I'm sure with all of the trainings that you've done and all of the experience that you have in the mental wellness space, you have ton of resources, tools, education at your fingertips, and that must create a unique methodology to you, whether you whether you have some frameworks or not. I'm just curious to learn a bit more about what tools and education you would share. I guess starting from a high level, imagining
Yeah.
someone is maybe or maybe not uh, ADHD, or maybe they are, but they might not be diagnosed and wondering, maybe I have ADHD, maybe I don't, but I'm not sure. I definitely feel some of those symptoms of maybe sensory overwhelm in some situations at work. I feel not so motivated in my job, but I keep pushing, 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 and I feel exhausted. These kinds of things. What would you say to that person as like, ooh, high level tools and journey that you recommend?
Um, I do see everyone as unique. So when I'm working with people, it's a very individual journey. But nervous system regulation is the biggest.
The
It
number one
is.
thing, nervous system.
It is. Yeah. That would be um, the first place that I would start in terms of helping people connect to their own body, their own experiences, and finding a way to manage their state so that they can not necessarily experience the extremes without knowing how to sort of support themselves to come back into alignment. Um, Burnout or mental health issues or ADHD can put us into um, that fight or flight mode, that where it's just a repetitive um, experience that is overwhelming. You know, it yeah, it's common to everyone in small doses, but for people who have these conditions, it can be very it can be impactful on a daily basis and impact all areas of our life. It can affect relationships, sleep, everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I'm not mistaken, well, I'd love your perspective on this. To what extent, well, let me think about how to phrase this question. Um, is nervous system dysregulation always caused by trauma, or can it be caused by other things than trauma? What's the relationship between nervous system dysregulation and trauma, I guess, is the open-ended question.
What's the relationship between them? I think anyone that has perhaps had a severe trauma or that sense of compounding trauma. So, has anyone not had trauma at all? I think
That is another very
that,
interesting question that deserves its light as well.
yeah, I think it's open to interpretation in terms of what people would even define as trauma, because trauma is an experience that is unique to the individual and how they. So, do I think that nervous system regulation and trauma are linked? 1,000,000%. Um, in terms of an effective strategy to try and find your way through that and not eliminate your experience, but adapt, accept, learn how to trust yourself, and find strategies to regulate that nervous system is critical to people who've experienced trauma. I don't know if the first part of your question, if I answered that. What was the question again? Oh, I
No,
think
no
it's just
worries.
yes.
I'm actually, yeah, absolutely. You did answer. Um, I I'd love to know what tools or modalities or even education or experiences you would recommend in order to achieve nervous system regulation.
That's interesting. So, the first thing that just popped into my head, which isn't a specific strategy that that's in research or um, it's not formal. I think you have to be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
Um, that if
Yeah,
if you can just sort
absolutely.
of try and have the attitude that um, regardless of what it is that you've been through or that you're struggling with or that you even just a little bit uncomfortable within yourself, if you think there's something wrong, just be kind to yourself. Like, it doesn't matter. You don't need a diagnosis. You don't need someone to tell you that there is something wrong with you necessarily. It's just how can you manage how you're feeling a little bit better. Um, and one way is being kind to yourself. Um, the other thing I would encourage people to do is to not isolate. Um, Isolation and not connecting with people is a huge thing that impacts our everything. Um,
Yeah,
so yeah,
absolutely.
if you can connect with people, that's ultimately the goal, I think, of having a healthy nervous system and managing it well. It is about connection. So it's sort of moving from that real fight or flight where you think you're going to be eaten by a tiger, or your body and mind thinks you're going to be eaten by a tiger, to feeling comfortable in someone else's presence, maybe giving them a hug and feeling positive emotion or sensations around having connection with others. It doesn't even have to be human. Like, if you're not really a human person, lots of people go through at least stages where they're struggling, where they don't feel like they can do people. But um, animals, plants, nature would be a really good starting point if you're feeling disconnected or unhappy or any kind of vibes like that. Get outside, get outside, put your feet on the ground, go for a little walk, move your body. That is also my third tip. Move your body
Yeah,
in
that's
any
always
way
good.
that you feel
Yeah.
comfortable.
Hmm.
Yeah. I've
Absolutely.
most recently been I'm doing another course at the moment called Embodied Teaching. And it has like a Qigong kind of movement. It's actually Nigong, which is looking inside and moving slowly. It's kind of like a Tai Chi, but yeah, slow inner focus and movement. So any movement though, literally. If you like yoga, if you like dancing, if you like, even if you don't know if you like it, give it a crack. You never know. You might actually really enjoy it. So I don't know if you were just about to ask me another question, but you did sort of allude to framework before, and I have actually got one.
Yeah.
Would you like me to tell you a little bit about it?
Please do. Please do share.
Um, so it's called Real Harmony. So I guess like the overarching thing about what I'm doing is helping women in leadership to actually change the culture and experience of women everywhere. Um, I really actually want the outcome of what the work that I do for people to look at women and see value in them. So not just themselves finding it, feeling it and experiencing it, but have the ripple effect of their family and community also valuing them more and potentially reducing um, violence against women. But my framework is real harmony. So I think the inner experience of harmony's been lost, or maybe even never experienced for a lot of people. So I start with embodiment, so radical embodiment, helping women understand the sensations in their body. I feel that that's also something that's lacking in um, a lot of cultures, a lot of age groups. People don't necessarily have sensations or understand what they are. But essentially, emotion is just um, that is what can kind of get locked in your body. The sensations then get sort of blocked. So I do embodiment, and then emotional regulation is the second stage. So um, that's that nervous system stuff, really. It's really quite a lot of work can go into that stage. And there's a lot of tools and things that I use that are tailored to the individual. Then we look at aligned leadership, and that is not just, you know, um, leadership isn't a title, it's an experience. I start with self leadership really, but because we are working with women in leadership roles, it does flow out to a more community and business environment, but aligning your leadership across all areas of life really. And legacy impact is the L in the Real Harmony framework. I think having all, not I think, I know from experience, all of the people that I've supported over the 20 years, that is the gap. If women, and if anyone can find and practice and understand their inner strength and their inner harmony from this framework, they can take on any challenges. Decision making becomes really easy. Connection becomes more natural. Everything about life becomes easier. You get into flow. So that is the whole thing. You can make choices and not do it with fear. Um, and that's really what I want everyone to be able to experience.
That is what we like to hear. Amazing. Yeah, sounds like a solid framework that summarizes the full picture, and within which a lot of tools can exist that of course can be tailored to individuals' needs. As we wind down towards the end of the podcast, I'd love to know about any topic or idea that you maybe haven't mentioned yet, but feel like would be worth mentioning or emphasizing.
Yeah, my community is launching soon, and that is a closed community for women. And I keep on saying women all the way throughout this because that's where my sort of concept with my business started. However, so basically, being a closed community, that's in every sense of the word. It's also capped. So once I hit a certain number of people, I want to maintain quality and access and support for women. I also want it to feel safe and really connected so that they can all genuinely get to know each other. So that's the community. It's going to be a safe space. It's going to be for women leaders, not necessarily women who've had a violent sort of background or experience, but overall, having those ripple effects will support culturally that goal that I have. But most recently, I've had a couple of men ask me, but what about me? So, you know what? Men need support with emotional regulation, embodiment, understanding um, how to work with women, how to make inclusive environments and supportive environments for women in leadership, to create opportunities, etc., rather than um, there's not enough women in leadership for starters. So yeah, I will work with men on a one-on-one basis if they genuinely want this kind of work, that they can improve themselves and they want to work on that. I will do that one-on-one. They won't be invited into that community, but they will be able to access one-on-one coaching. So hopefully tackling my objective from a range of angles will, yeah, bear fruit. So exciting.
Yeah, no, that's really great. Thank you for sharing about that. Um, yeah, is there anything else that you want to share before wrapping up?
I'll give you some links to put in show notes if anyone's interested. So
Yeah.
I can give you
So
obviously my
the links
website.
will, yeah, all be in the show notes. What would be the best next step for someone listening? Would it be to hop directly onto those links?
Yeah, depending on where they're at in terms of what type of action or interest that they would want from the conversation. If they just want to chat, um, just any of those, you can just, you know, chat with me on Instagram or something like that if you want to start a conversation. But um, I'm on LinkedIn and I do a newsletter that's quite regular now. So people can follow that, get some information. But there will be a link and you can jump on, try and get into the community. And my book will be launched and the link for that will be on the website in a couple of weeks as well. So depending where they're at in their journey and what they are wanting to connect with, there's a couple of different options there. I've got like free downloads and things like that as well.
Beautiful. What's the LinkedIn newsletter about?
It's just called Lead with Harmony. It's about leadership, yeah, but not in a I guess how I would frame it is it's a little bit modern leadership, and it
Yeah,
does have an
integrated
embodiment. Yeah,
and
yeah,
yeah, embodied, kind of holistic, emotionally regulated leadership, not
yes.
hardcore, burnt out on caffeine uh, leadership.
That's
Yeah,
exactly right.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
perfect. Well, wonderful. Renee, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for sharing your inspiring story, your words of wisdom, and your practical tools. If anybody would like to connect, the links will be in the show notes. Yeah, thank you for being such a great guest.
Thanks, Anthony. It was a wonderful opportunity and I really appreciate it.
Such a
Thank you.
pleasure. Likewise.